Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 13 of What If Naruto was sent to the past by the Shinigami. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see part 14 of it, comment down below and let me know. Then go ahead and check out other what ifs in the channel. Before we start, please do support for more awesome content. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So let's start this video. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. I have resigned an entire village to death, knowing that innocent lives would be lost, and for what? For my family. For peace. For myself. I wasn't ordered to do this. I went beyond my orders and took matters into my own hands. Yes, my initial mission had nothing to do with this. I told myself that I was in the right, that I was doing it to prevent retaliation. I acted. Spirits preserve me. I set that creature loose on Iwa, while I ripped apart Inoki, as if he were a bloody paper bag. I can still hear their screams, see them glaring at me, accusing me with dead eyes, crying out for my head. The blood of an entire nation, on my hands. Nothing left of it but dust and light and rubble. Do the ends justify the means? I'm doing this for peace, or so I tell myself, but will my actions simply give rise to another conflict? Another threat? Another war? Some would call my actions a deterrent. Once, I might have agreed. Now, I'm not so sure. With Sarutobi using me like a blunt hammer, it's so easy to see everything as a nail, something that needs to be hammered into submission. At some point, I gave up trying to save the world, and focused on saving what was closest to me, those I've come to care for. Instead, I'm fucking everything up. Just look at what I've done. Makoto, Kushina, my own mother. Kurura, Hashi, and Kakura, to name a few besides. Don't even get me started on the voice in my head. Fuck's sake, I'm probably going to end up siring more than half of my friends at this rate. How fucked up is that? But I can't change it any more than I can change the way I feel. Can't go back, I can't fix it, can't undo what I've done. I have to live with it, live with this. What I've done. What I've seen myself become. I'm not sure of anything anymore. These last few days the questions hound me like angry vultures, picking at me as I sit in the rubble of this village, waiting for survivors and stragglers, finding none. Am I losing myself? Have I lost my way? Am I becoming him? Am I in danger of becoming the very thing that I hate? Would the old me have done this? Purged an entire village. I'm marked now, changed forevermore, altered in ways I can't even begin to understand. Mentally. And physically as well. Once, before I became this, I would have balked at such a thought and refused to go through with it. A part of me still does. Balk, that is. But that wasn't enough to stop me from committing genocide now, was it? I was there. I let Aldun loose. I watched as he swallowed the entire village, all their souls. Whole in a single breath. I didn't turn my back. I watched. Had to be me. Someone else might have gotten it wrong. Someone else might have botched the assassination, or worse, they could have been captured, and then where would we be? I know what I am now. A man. A monster. I understand what my enemies see me as, what they think I am. I've become this world's darkness, their Bujiman, the thing all men fear. I am the Black Death. Naruto. Uzumaki Uchiha. What does it matter now that I've done this? Let them hate me. Let them fear me. It will keep them in check in this game of chess. If that fear is what it takes to set things right, if I have to smash the board, then I'll happily take up the mantle. Until Madara is destroyed. Until I've set everything right. Then I'll accept whatever sentence the world throws at me. I will die another day, but not this day. Not today. Not today. Naruto sat quietly amidst the wreckage of Iwagakure, ignorant of the rain beating down around him, ignorant of the flimsy tent he directed, ignorant of a great many things. His journal lay unfinished in his hands, his eyes staring listlessly into the puddle at his feet, all the while trying to make sense of what his reflection was telling him. Something had happened. Something had changed. And he wasn't entirely certain that he liked that change. One of the more physical manifestations of this change was currently staring back at him, baring its teeth in a stark snarl of frustration. White. His hair had turned white. For the life of him, he couldn't understand why. His hair had lost all semblance of color, bleached of the onyx black that so defined the Uchiha, turned the color of ashes and dead snow. No amount of chakra or henge on his part could hope to fix it, unlike the ugly red horns jutting out of his head. With enough will and focus he could make them vanish, though they'd always return before long. Beyond the seemingly cosmetic changes, his face still seemed the same, just a bit more leonine, he supposed. It was still him, but he felt cold. Whatever was happening to him, he wasn't entirely certain he liked it. This hurts you. Naruto looked up from his work, and once more his journal went unfinished. He didn't need to, he already knew who it was, but talking to them made him feel better. It's slightly insane. And here I am, he began slowly, trying not to avert his gaze, talking to the ghost in my head, you know. I am not, nor have I ever been a ghost. Full lips corked in a childish pout. I'm quite real. Real enough to go fuck yourself. My. Kaguya's peal of delighted laughter found itself momentarily concealed behind a dainty hand, the sound eclipsed by a thunderous explosion in the sky. You act as if I'm a figment of your imagination, Naruto-kun. The storm was ramping up. His crude shelter might not hold if the weather worsened. Her outburst gave him the time to wonder if she really was just that. What was she? A specter? A figment? A piece of his own broken mind, conjuring up thoughts to assuage his own guilt. The idea that she might be real terrified him. Guess who was she, exactly? Whoever she was, or claimed to be, she'd certainly become far more solid than he remembered, though she likely owed that to their absorbing the 5 tails. Eljuin had been a fiend and a glutton to boot, but even the legendary Lord of Dragons was not so greedy as to steal the horse-like Biju out from under them. Kaguya had devoured Kakyo, Jinchuriki and all. She looked positively regal in appearance, yet her expression hinted at some lingering emotion he didn't understand. Was she taking pity on him? Trying to comfort him in his moment of weakness? Had she come to torment him like all the others? Or maybe, you did what you thought was best for the greater good. Kaguya ghosted in front of him before he could finish that thought. A true paragon. Don't patronize me. He croaked her, cradling a fragment of a child's skull in his hand. Stand in the ashes of 1,000 dead and ask them if my honor matters. So small. So young. And he'd killed her. If not by direct action, then by his deeds. I feel like a renegade. A murderer. You are not. A few days ago, he might have agreed with her. But now, I am. His fist ground around the child's shattered skull until blood welled up between them, bleaching the bone red. He threw the scarlet shards away in disgust, sending them clattering away into the storm. He nearly missed Kaguya's words amidst the next peal of thunder, but he felt their bite all the same. Like the fangs of a starving beast, they sank deep into his heart, seized upon the last dregs of his self-control, and ripped them to pieces, sundering his patience and leaving his emotions unchained. Months of anger and doubt and exasperation all bubbled up at once. Then you are an absolute fool for thinking so. I am. He shot upright with such force that Kaguya jerked back, startled. This should have mollified him. It only made Naruto even angrier. What do you want me to say, eh? Oh, he rose up over her with might and menace, eyes flickering wildly, rioting between the reds and purples of his twin jutsu. That I killed them. His hands wrapped around the hem of her dress. I did. Countless people. I knew what would happen from the moment I set foot in this village, the moment I sixed Aljun on them. I did it anyway. A hand stabbed into his pockets, whipping a scroll free descended flying into her face. And the best part of it all. This. I thought the entire village wanted you dead. She offered a demure blink, reading what remained of the ink. That's what I thought too. Until I found this. Broken, bitter laugh bubbled up out of him like sulfur, each word so much ash in his throat. Turns out most of them didn't even want war. It was only a few extremists like Inoki and his inner circle that wanted to start shit. The rest they were scared. Terrified of me. They were going to surrender. And I killed them anyway. You didn't know. That's no excuse. All of that high and mighty talk, and what did I do? I pushed out and sent them to the slaughter. You know what? He threw his hands up in exasperation and stalked back to the stump. Fuck it. I don't even know why I'm discussing this with you. The horn goddess stared at him, briefly taken aback by his vicious denunciation. Dead eyes the color of the void regarded him coolly for a moment. Her horn had tilted, considering the great swathe of destruction strewn before them. She stared at the rubble for a time, unblinking as thunder roared, and the winds howled mere yards beyond their shelter. When her milky white orbs found him again, they carried only curiosity. Would you do it again? Naruto's head snapped up. What? Would you kill them all again, given the chance? Naruto didn't have a proper answer to that, but his guilt must have shown through, because Kaguya's expression changed. A frail-looking hand descended, cupping his cheek and turning his face to hers. The former blonde bristled and tried to wriggle free, but she had a grip like iron against his chin, and would not be denied. Her fingers burned against his skin, her claw-like nails digging into his very bones. Look at me. She crooned. Look at me and see what will come if you continue your course. Reluctantly, he complied. One moment he was staring into the face of an entity that might be God. The next, he was somewhere was it someone else. Moderate. The wizened old Uchiha froze, half risen on his throne as a voice like thunder ripped through his mountainous hideaway. He felt the distant explosion and jerked upright. That was his cue. Time to get the hell out of Dodge before hell itself found him and tore him a new one. Ah dump. A noise like crawling thunder jerked him out of his reverie. Standing before him, still as a stone statue, Naruto folded his arms. The spiky mess of his black locks tilted slightly with his head, crimson eyes regarding him balefully. When those arms fell to his side he nearly bolted dead away, restraining himself only with a supreme effort of will. Naruto drifted closer, his entire countenance betraying smug, silent satisfaction. So, moderate. His nemesis began, darkly amused. Where are you going? The renegade shrank back. Oh, you know, places. Places, Naruto cocked his head aside, considering. Then he pointed, indicating some far-off point behind the old man's shoulder. Like that mountain over there. Well, actually that looks more like a plateau. The next thing he knew, he was flying towards the very mountain Naruto had indicated. Stone and rubble burst before his face in swift succession, tearing rents in his armor, driving small cuts into his body. He seemed to fall for an eternity, crashing through rock and mortar, before velocity finally took a bit of pity on him, and let him grind to a halt. Unfortunately, his body was not so swift to recover. His eyes were the first to gain some semblance of sense back as he lay there, trapped in the crater. And what they saw there, dangling before him. Naruto hoisted the Rasen Shuriken aloft in his palm, snarling. Let's see if you can come back from this. Oh, shit. The world lurched around him, and just like that Naruto found himself back to reality, staring into those eerie eyes. What the fuck was that? You? One of your many possible futures. The Horn Goddess released him and took a seat beside him, smiling. When she dared to take his hand in her own, he didn't resist, frowning as her pale fingers twined with his own. I'll say it again, Naruto. I am yours. Always. Kaguya leaned into him then, and her forehead pressed against his, nose nuzzling his cheek happily. Forever yours. You mortals are my mortals. You goals, my goals. I will never abandon you, never betray your confidence. Accept my help, and you'll gain a strength you've never known, a might to make the gods themselves tremble. Turn that away. Let me guess. He deadpanned. Madara wins. In short, yes. She chimed. He grows stronger with each passing day. You're the only one who can stop him, now. Surely you realize that. If I stop, he wins. Yes. If I take my family and run, he wins. Correct. Does it make you weary? Why me? He asked at last, despair gnashing at his heart. Because he was tired. Tired of fighting and killing, of facing old friends and ending them, too. So damn tired of it all. Why do I have to suffer through this? I shouldn't have to fix it. Why didn't that damn Shinigami just let me die? Good men do not ask for greatness. Oh, fuck you. They sat there in relative silence together, the pole broken only by the crashing deluge outside. Naruto used that time to think, to contemplate his deeds. All the while the storm raged on. It could have been minutes. It might have been hours. At some point he suspected she might have fallen asleep against his shoulder, but no, when he turned his head those white eyes met his quietly. She shifted against him, careful so as not to poke out an eye with her deadly red horns. I'm not a god, you know. He murmured. Of course, you aren't, silly boy. Kaguya turned her head to look up at him, inordinately pleased by his considerations. Not yet. A hand rose, idly stroking his white locks, caressing his face. Not quite. But with my help you could be. I can make you so much more than you are. Not sure I want to be anything more than what I already am, Tebeo. You already are. She shook her head, smiling. That why I love you. His cheeks colored, but he refused to back down. Prove it. As you wish. She looked him right in the eye. And kissed him. Her lips, and what lovely lips they were. Brushed his own gently, tentatively at first. Slowly, then with a staid boldness, freezing him in place as Kaguya pulled herself into his lap and ground herself against him, welding her mouth to his even as she wound a leg against his own. His arms traitors. Betrayed him almost immediately, her lips parting on a moan as they anchored themselves to her hips. And then she was done. Leaning back into his lap, she flashed him an impish smile. Goddess got your tongue. For a heartbeat, Naruto froze, keenly aware of her weight settling against him. Her body, warm and soft against his own. That'll be one soul, please. An awful silence followed. And then. Ah! Naruto swore and tried to push her off to no avail. What the hell? I'm not giving you my soul, woman. Kaguya withdrew, laughing. I'm joking. That you feel such guilt means you are a true hero, one takes no joy in the suffering of others. She told him gently. And you're so honorable. I can think of no one better suited for this role. The reborn Uchiha shook his head loosely, the fight drained right out of him. He didn't feel like a hero. Algin had feasted well. The souls of every man, woman, and child residing in Iwagakure at the time now took up residence in the dragon's stomach. Still, Naruto remained. He needed to see. Wanted to see. Even if it hurt him, even if he cursed himself 1,000 times over, he needed to see this done, to see it through to the bitter end. He couldn't simply walk away, and leave the world eater to his feast, wouldn't pretend that his meal wasn't through his own inaction. He had to see the deaths he had caused, see them, and mourn their passing. Otherwise, he'd never be able to live with himself. Now he almost wished he hadn't. But he'd had to. Merely assassinating Inoki wasn't enough. His death would merely cause the villagers to rally around him as a martyr. No, he had to believe that his scorched earth response had been the right choice at the time, if perhaps not the most appropriate one at the time. Kaguya blinked suddenly, drawn to a noise in the storm. Ah! She exclaimed softly, her one smile deepening. It seems your dragon wasn't as thorough as you thought. Eh? Before he could think to stop her, or even ask what was wrong, the horned woman wriggled out of his grasp and darted outside, stepping out beyond the tarp. The rain around her was banished with a negligent gesture, as though a giant dome of invisible air had inserted itself between her and the pouring deluge. Bare feet carried her gracefully over the rubble, leading to a demolished homestead. Her hand descended slowly, snatching up a large portion of rubble and depositing it neatly at his feet, revealing a battered body clutching tight to a wrapped bundle. Even then Naruto didn't understand what was happening. What use had she with a corpse? Wah! Until the squalling sound of an infant broke the silence. Oh? Kaguya-kun. What have we here? For a moment, Naruto stopped breathing. It shouldn't have been possible. Aljun had drank Iwa dry. He gorged himself of the font of hundreds of souls, civilian and shinobi alike. The idea that he'd missed someone, even if they were a mewling babe, boggled the mind. Yet here she was, a tiny girl no less than a month old, wrapped tight in swaddling clothes. Dark tufts of hair, pudgy face and dark eyes all, she sported an impressive pair of lungs, for she wailed loud and fierce. At Kaguya's touch the little one quieted, falling into a deep restful slumber. See? The goddess purred, offering him the child. Even in the darkest places, there is always life. Naruto was silent for a long moment, staring down at the slumbering infant nestled in his arms, ignorant of the rain crashing down around his shoulders. She'd live given proper care. But did she deserve to? Part of him, the pragmatical Uchiha he'd unwillingly become, demanded her death. It was simply logical fuck no. The rest of him revolted so openly that the notion was quashed before it could even be tabled. He was many means of mad, perhaps even slightly insane, but this was where he'd draw the line. Well, he muttered to the sleeping babe, I don't know what to name you, but it looks like you're coming with me. The way to atone. Repent for what he'd done. Would he do it again? Kaguya had asked him this. And the answer terrified him, even more than the mewling infant in his arms. He'd had an answer before she'd even asked the question. Finding the scroll only made his conscience all the more heavy, but that answer hadn't changed in the slightest, despite his guilt. Would he slaughter an entire village? Would he willingly consign innocent and guilty alike to the void once again given the opportunity? If he had a chance, would he take a different path, risk a change? No. If it meant peace, a freedom from Madara's machinations, he would do much worse. But not this. He would not kill this last child of Iwa. Spirits damn him, he just didn't have it in him. Taking a long breath, he started back to the tent, child in arm. Yes, had to be him. Someone else might have gotten it wrong. I'm losing myself. Having gone through the last few entries in this old journal of mine, I've come to that conclusion. I gaze upon these tattered pages and I feel nothing for them. No regret. No remorse. Only cold cynicism. Where did the hope go? When did I stop caring for anything more than the outcome? Where did I become cold? When did I turn cruel? Where did I state to value Konoha's existence over that of the other villages of the world itself? I don't know. I can't even see where it started. Did it begin when the Shinigami pulled me from the afterlife? Or was it slower than that? More insidious? Subtle? I fear the latter, and that terrifies me. My memories are my only recourse in this, but even they've begun to get fuzzy as of late. Kayagi, and isn't that another can of worms? Assures me I have nothing to fear. She swears she won't let me lose myself, but even so, the fear is still there. My hair has gone white. The color of ash. Even my eyebrows match it now. I don't understand what caused it. The shock. Trauma. Or something more sinister. Am I still myself? Am I Madara? Am I Kaguya? Am I Naruto? Some strange hybrid of the three. Gods above, am I even me anymore? I don't think I have many entries left in me. Gods. What am I becoming? Open the gates. At the sentry's shout, the great green doors of Konoha opened. With a ponderous groan, the steel-shot barriers parted in either directions as the crank turned, revealing the village beyond. For Naruto, it felt like an eternity until he could finally glimpse his old home. Faint shards of reluctant morning sunlight peeked through the growing gaps, drawing a muffled yawn from the slumbering babe nestled his arms. Mercifully, little Kurasuchi he'd begun to suspect it was her didn't raise a fuss, nor did the guards deny him entry, because of her presence. A few glanced at the child as he passed, but none proved foolish enough to challenge him for her. Good. Regardless of their thoughts, the time-traveling terror was quietly chuffed by the distinct absence of a crowd. The last time he'd come home, it had been to a teeming mass of civilians. This time around, only a handful of shinobi had gathered to greet his return, and of their number, many appeared reluctant to approach. Almost as if they were afraid of him. It made a twisted sort of sense, really. He could have outrun the news perhaps, if he had been so inclined, but he hadn't. Hadn't been in his right mind, either. Instead, he'd taken a long and meandering path back to the village at top speed, arriving long afterward. Iwa was gone and he'd been the one to do the deed, damning them all. It remained to be seen what exactly the world knew of his foe. Well, damn. I wonder what they think of me. Many things, none of them good. Naruto didn't need Kaguya's words. He could sense it. Like a shroud of palpable unease, so too did he find himself able to see the concern in the villagers, taste their anxiety roiling in the air. Fear. They were afraid of him, and in the realization rocked his world to the core. This went well beyond anything he could gauge even with his eyes active, or his cloak. Not quite mind reading, he could just feel them. It wasn't something he could explain, let alone lend words to. Something had changed in him during his last rampage. Everything was raw, and he couldn't find a way to shut it off. Part of him wasn't sure he wanted to. That raised all manner of red flags. Yet another thing to worry about. Damn, but it never ended, did it? If he wasn't fighting armies or deposing tyrants, he was fighting himself for control of his own body. Even now he could feel the horns beneath his skin, those red spires lurking just beneath the surface. Stop. Kaguya snapped at him, her harsh words cutting through the fog of his panic, bringing with them a blessed sense of numbness. Breathe. Startled, Naruto exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The world spun back into focus, and he found himself detached from it all, separated from the sea of heightened emotions he'd been privy to mere moments before. It was not something he ever wished to experience again. Everything was fraying, breaking, and he had to rein it in despite the pain. The alternative was unacceptable. Steeling himself, the whiskered warrior shook his head mightily and straightened up. There. He felt a ghostly hand grace his shoulder. Anxiety's only going to make it worse, you know. Remember what I told you. Calm yourself. Naruto groaned. Kill me now? Never. The lightest tap between his shoulders spurred him forward to meet his fate. Scarce, this was going to cause problems for him. You couldn't inspire the masses when they were afraid to speak your name. There would be questions, of course, and he'd have to answer them, whether he wanted to or not. He could already feel the beginnings of a migraine coming on. Though he wanted nothing more than to go home and fall into bed, it seemed that was no longer an option. A flicker of motion in the corner of his vision informed him that one of the nearby Anbu had finally mustered up the nerve to approach. Several, in fact. Well, this boded poorly. Uchiha Naruto. Their bull-masked leader intoned solemnly, stopping just out of arm's reach. The Hokage wishes to speak with you. Where's my family? Much like the man's namesake, the ninja bull passed him, his sandals kicking up dust. I need to see them. He barely made it 3 steps before he found himself facing a wall of Anbu. With all due respect, sir, their leader replied, I can't allow that. Naruto stopped cold. I should kill you. All of you. Wait, where had that thought come from? It took a physical effort on his part to maintain his smile in the face of the captain's ire. More so for him to will his muscles to relax. Look, I know the old man wants to see me, but as you can see, I'm a bit busy. A hand clamped down on his wrist like an iron vice, denying him passage. He was most insistent, sir. You can leave the infant with us. Even as the man spoke, he attempted to reach for her. No, I really wouldn't. Little Kurasuchi chose that moment to discharge the contents of her breakfast onto the man's mask in spectacular fashion. Baby formula wasn't easy to come by when you were out in the wilds. Thankfully, he'd had the next best thing. To be fair, he wasn't sure how he felt about feeding her from the teat of a woman who claimed to be a living goddess, but in this moment he knew exactly how the captain felt. Nothing like a bit of spit up to ruin your day. Better yet, the babe was actually smiling. Somehow, the sight of it lightened his spirits. This time, his smile wasn't forced at all. On second thought, let's go. Have you taken leave of your senses? Sarutobi's anger was to be expected, taken for granted, even. Naruto didn't flinch as his clenched fist crashed down on the desk, nor did the mewling babe in his arms. He'd known the old man's wrath was coming. From the moment he'd ripped Inoki's soul from his body and ground Iwa to dust, he had expected it. By the time he'd been escorted to the man's office, he was more than prepared. Ah, and there it was now, as the old geezer leaned back in his chair. The exhausted sigh. That look of silent disappointment bordering on scorn. He'd been on the receiving end of that look far too many times to count in the past. It almost felt like another life now. It did nothing to quench his anger. He didn't need the third to tell him how badly he'd screwed the pooch on this one. The guilt was something a part of him already. He knew. He'd agonized over it during the days it took him to trek back. Every minute of every day had been spent wondering how he could have done things differently, and while he hadn't quite come to terms with what he'd done, he knew tearing himself apart benefited no one but the enemy. Right now, he needed to explain himself lest he risk being thrown into a cell. Or worse. In the end he swallowed his spite, straightened up, and said the only thing he could think to say. Not so loud. Pardon? I said, don't be so loud. You're going to make Kurasuchi cry. Sarutobi's gaze flicked to the babe in his arms, and his gaze softened. You had to know him to see it, and Naruto knew him very well. He could see it in the way his eyes creased, the slightest hint of hesitation as he laid his gaze on those tiny dark orbs. He'd always had a soft spot for children. Kurasuchi was no exception. Rising from his desk, the wary Kage approached. If she was at all afraid of him, Kurasuchi did little to show it. After all, she was far too focused on tugging at Naruto's vest. After a moment's thought, Hiruzen patted her head and returned his gaze to the ninja in question. I was wondering why you'd brought her here. He rumbled. A survivor. Alas. Naruto relented reluctantly. I aim to take care of her. I see. Have one of your clones take her outside, for now. It took him a handful of seconds to realize it wasn't a request. As the door eased shut behind his doppelganger, Hiruzen returned to his desk and fixed Naruto with a state of pure steel. Tell me what happened. And now they came down to it. I was captured and forced to fight my way out. Not a lie. He has surrendered and been captured because of it. I didn't have much room to improvise. No one lived to contradict him, and he wasn't about to submit to a Uzumaki probe though. They both knew such an attempt would prove fruitless. It still didn't justify what he'd done. They both knew that. This went well beyond a simple reprimand. One way or another he was going to be punished for this, no matter what he said. But that didn't mean he had to go down quietly. Your mission was to assassinate the Tsukihikage. Hiruzen repeated flatly, his voice sparking like flint. Not summon a dragon, to devour the souls of innocent women and children. Surely you could have escaped without slaughtering them all. Naruto stiffened. How did he know that? The dawn broke and suspicion came rushing in. Was it that crystal ball of his? Damn, I can't remember its range. My summons may have been too enthusiastic. Naruto countered, grimacing at the mention of Algern. If I could go back and do it over, I'd spare them. That may well be, Hiruzen steepled his fingers steadily, but you cannot take back what you've done. Something black inside of Naruto bristled at the subtle insinuation lurking behind those words. Hey, he growled, you were the one that sent me into that hot zone. We didn't even try. Need I remind you that you accepted this mission, Naruto? The Sandaime interjected sternly, silencing him. You were the one who chose this. The consequences fall upon you. You can't possibly wipe a village off the map and expect to escape the consequences. We can't afford to set an example like this, let alone that kind of a precedent. It's too dangerous. The other nations are already unilaterally condemning your actions. Even our allies can't stomach what you've done. Within his subconscious, Kaguya sucked in an angry breath. So that's how it is. Wait, what? I'm sorry Naruto, I truly am, but I'm afraid you've left me no choice. As if sensing the unspoken question, the aging Kage barreled onwards. For your crimes against humanity, I hereby strip you of all rank and privilege within the village, and place you under arrest effective immediately. Into the stunned silence, he charged ahead. Your squad will be reassigned to another Jonin after their return from their present mission to the border. Due to your exemplary service prior to this, you will be given a trial. Naruto didn't hear the rest. The rest of the words faded away into an endless animal bleat, eclipsed only by the pounding of his pulse. Darkness pressed around the corners of his vision and all the color faded from the world, replaced by muted gray. Words escaped him, and his mind rejected it so wholly he refused to accept the reality of this betrayal. A dream. This had to be a bad dream. Instead of arguing his side of the story, he'd be thrown in irons. His triumphant return replaced by a cold cell. And while he languished there, Madara would roam free, using his pawns. The world would go on, and everything would end once again. A spark of anger ignited deep in his chest, fanning the flames of rebellion. After all he'd done, this was how they repaid him. His hands trembled. I don't even. What justice was this? His next words were a whisper. Is that why the Anbu are waiting outside? Pity. He hated the pity in those eyes, turned away from it. People are afraid. What you did, Naruto, it was monstrous. They need time to adjust. Well, I rot in a cell. He challenged. You'll only remain there until the council reaches a verdict. Sarutobi argued. If they find you innocent. You're kidding me, right? Naruto physically recoiled from the statement, genuinely surprised by how much the old man had hurt him, with what he doubtlessly believed to be righteous action. So that's how it is. I carried out my duties without question. I fought to keep the village safe. I shed blood and tears on the battlefield with my fellow shinobi. I mourned them when they died. Then I make one mistake, one error, a few villagers piss and moan about it, and suddenly I'm a fucking scapegoat. And you expect me to accept this? Perhaps Hiruzen recognized his poor choice of words then, perhaps not. Regardless, he found himself unable to predict what came next. You hypocrite. Hiruzen blinked in disbelief. Excuse me. You heard me. Naruto snarled, rounding on the man he'd once seen as a grandfather with a vicious hiss. Spare me the lies and inequities. I'm a fucking scapegoat. That's what I am to the world, isn't it, the Black Death? Reaper of the innocent. Is that what they're calling me now? An oath breaker? Because I broke one of their so-called vows. So many vows. Hissing in anger, he swung his fist against the wall, cratering it with a single swing. They make you swear and swear. Defend your cage. Obey your lord. Keep his secrets. Do his bidding. Your life for his. But obey your clan. Love your family. Protect the innocent. Defend the weak. Respect the gods. Obey the laws. Humming his face, the warrior shook his head, a grim scowl etching itself across his face. It's too much. No matter what you do, you're forsaking one vow or the other. Fuck that. You said it yourself, didn't you? I'm a monster. Perhaps the people should speak more softly to me then, because these days the enemies of this monster are dropping like flies. Panting from his explosive rant, he turned burning eyes on his old friend. Choose your next words carefully, Naruto. Sarutobi warned, his voice echoing into the silence. I may be a man of peace, but I will not tolerate disrespect. Neither will I. The Uchiha snapped back, baring his teeth in a snarl. I would allow you to toss me in a cell with, he swallowed, nearly mentioning Madara before stopping himself, a bloody war on. I'm needed here. He could have thrown more than a dozen arguments at the old man, but realized only one stood any chance of changing his mind. The answer was obvious. I have to stop. Sarutobi glanced at him askance. I'm afraid I don't understand what you're saying. Of course you don't. Once more Naruto's temper slipped its leash, to which he brought a clenched fist crashing down on the table. Don't you get it? For the sake of argument, let's say I do as you ask. Throw myself into a cell and wait for judgment. Then what? The war keeps going, more innocents die, and for what? Because your best weapon's rotting in a cell, just to satisfy your enemies. Yes, enemies, old man. Because they're the only ones who benefit from this. So go ahead. Alienate me, let it all go to hell. If I'm guilty, I'll stay in prison for the rest of my days. But let's say I'm deemed innocent instead. All good, right? He paused for effect, letting the weight of his proposal sink in. Wrong. See, I have a very good memory. The Uchiha continued quietly, leaning forward over the desk, to make his point known. Downright scary, really. By the time I finally get out of that cell, be it weeks, months, years or even decades later, it'll still be there. The memory of how I was thrown away as a political puppet to satisfy the whims of our enemies. What do I fight for then? I'd cease to care about those around me, take on more and more dangerous tasks, all in the hope that I'm following the right path. I take out leader after leader, annihilating whomever dares stand against me, the village, us. Eventually I get promoted and command others to do the same. Round and around it goes. Why? What gives me the right to make decisions like that? Nothing. No, if we start to believe we know what's best for everyone, if I allow myself to think that this path is the only path, then I'll become him. Become who? My ancestor. He leaned back and away, all the while lying through his teeth. I refuse to become him. I'll become a weapon, a tool, a knife in the dark if I have to, but I'll never become that. Neither will I be a dupe. I've been down that road once before. Never again. I'm not some sacrifice for you to tend your precious will of fire. As a matter of fact, I'm out. His piece said. The former blonde spun on his heel, turned his back and marched away. Where are you going? Sarutobi's voice called at his back. I haven't given you permission to leave. Damn it. Naruto paused and exhaled a mighty sigh. He turned to face the third, even as his palm wrapped around the door with enough force to buckle the handle. Spears, he felt old. He never thought he'd see the day when he threatened the old man. Never in all his years. It made him feel hollow inside, as if he'd just betrayed someone most dear. He regretted killing those people. More than anything else. If it had been within his power to see them brought back, he would. But they hadn't just been killed, their souls were devoured. Destroyed. There was nothing to return. Scorn reared its ugly head and he shook it off. Where am I going? He retorted with a dry look at the man he'd once respected above all else. I'm going home. I'm going to find my partner, and fuck her into oblivion. I'm going to hold my son. Then I'm going to talk to my clan, take a long nap, and pretend this conversation never happened. Maybe you should, too. Let the dead rest. Better for both of us that way. To his credit, the old man didn't show so much as a flicker of killer intent. He didn't have to. Naruto, he began slowly, rising from his desk. Are you threatening me? No? It's not a threat. Then what is it? A promise. For a moment, he thought Hiruzen might actually call for the guards or worse, attempt to restrain him outright. His words bordered on treason, and he justified a direct order from his superior. The third would be well within his rights to do so. Could he fight the old man? Naruto wasn't certain, for he had no desire to do so. But he wasn't willing to let himself be raked over hot coals, either. It seems we're at an impasse, then. You can try to detain me if you like. The exhausted Uchiha relented, alone showering and peering over his smoldering shoulder. But I promise you I won't go quietly and you'll pay for it. Dearly. With blood. Buckets of it. But hey, he rolled his shoulders in a shrug, who knows? You could succeed. Orochimaru and Tsunade are still in the village. You might stand a chance with them at your back. Then again, you might not. Regardless, I don't want to fight you. My loyalty is to the village. Always has been, always will be. I'll gladly place myself under house arrest until you get the villagers in order, but nothing more. My guilt's more punishment than you could ever know. The man I knew would understand that. This time, no one challenged him when he departed. Retrieving Kurtsuchi from his shadow clone, Naruto found none of the Anbu, barred his presence this time around. A few followed him with their faceless masks when he stormed towards the exit, but whatever doubts or contemptuous thoughts they held for him remained hidden behind the porcelain facades. Good. He had enough scorn for one day. Any more of this and he might lose his temper and clobber someone. He knew where that would lead. No, he chastised himself, he needed to get out of the public eye for now. Sarutobi was right in that aspect at least. Right, then. No more drama. Just get home. Upon reaching the door leading to the street, the white head flung it open with his free arm. In that moment, his sole thought was to spirit himself away and wait for the storm to blow over. It never once occurred to him to feel sorry for what he'd said or done. He'd spoken true from his heart, and consequences be damned. For all his problems and obstacles, that much hadn't changed. His resolve, though briefly shaken by what he'd faced here today, remained firm. He would save the world from Madara's machinations, one way or another, even if he had to drag it kicking and screaming. You get points for determination, if nothing else, Kaguya purred. Oh, stuff it. To his surprise, he wasn't alone. Scarce had he stepped out of the Hokage building than he found the way shut to him, for a sizable crowd had gathered outside the tower to greet his return. Well, this boded poorly. Naruto nearly bristled on sheer instinct before he realized he recognized some of them. He might not know each of them by name, but it was impossible to miss the distinct features of the Uchiha clan. Much to his confusion, a smattering of Hyugas stood among them as well. Hashi and Makoto's doing, no doubt. Speaking of which, where were Makoto emerged from the throng of shinobi first, little Itachi cradled in her arms. Judging by the bedraggled state of her hair and her rumpled blue dress, she must have woken only minutes before. Hashi appeared to be in slightly less dire straits where appearance was concerned, or perhaps she'd recently returned from a mission. Regardless, it was unusual indeed to see her clad in her shinobi fatigues. Not a bad look for her. As she was at all perturbed by the sight of the infant in his arms, she did little to show it, thankfully. You look terrible. Makoto sighed, crossing the distance between them in a few quick strides, her dark eyes scrutinizing. What happened to your hair? Gee, thanks ever so much. Despite himself, Naruto couldn't find it in him to scowl. Less so when he saw Itachi. Spirits, he was growing fast. Just the sight of his son now wasn't that a thought wiped the tension from his mind like a cleansing tide. Carefully, he reached down to pat the babe's tiny head. Hey there, kiddo. The little boy squealed happily. Did he just say dad? Makoto actually laughed at that. He's a quick learner. I heard what happened and gathered everyone as soon as we could. His bride to be soothed, caressing his cheek. For what it's worth, the Uchiha clan is with you. Naruto nearly choked on his own spit. Hey, now. I'm not trying to start a rebellion or anything. All of you, just go home, will you? No, absolutely not. That was one flag he intended to avoid at all costs. Everything worked out in the end. I'm just on leave for a. Kurisuchi chose that moment to coo softly. Makoto's gaze shifted instantly. Naruto. Oh? Yes, dear. You're holding a baby. Care to explain? Now wait a sec. I can explain. She's not mine. Well, she is, but I didn't. Oh, please do. Makoto was trying very hard to be patient. She was also failing spectacularly. Perhaps you should start from the beginning. Hashi offered. Just like that, the migraine reasserted itself with a groan. Bit of a long story, that. Near the border of the land of fire, Kushina was going to die. She felt it in every breath, feared it in every step. Her lungs were on fire, begging for relief she couldn't afford to give. If she stopped even for a moment, she'd be caught. If she was caught, she'd meet the same fate as her teammates. Vanished, seemingly plucked from the very air itself. She had no way of knowing if they were dead or alive, only that she must run. Fighting meant certain death now. She'd seen what happened to their missed escort when they stood their ground. Their screams still echoed in her ears. No matter how far she ran, she still heard them. Worse, she'd lost her kunai. Still, she spurred herself on. Ibiki. Nawaki. No one knew. Fear spurred Kushina's leaden legs forward even as exhaustion took its toll, darkness creeping in at the edges of her vision. She was drawing almost exclusively from her tenant's power now, pulling as much chakra as she dared without risking her sanity. Even then she feared she wasn't nearly fast enough, though all her world was a blur, and though she flung herself through the trees with ever-increasing speed, she still hadn't been able to shake her pursuer. Her heightened senses told her they were still in hot pursuit. What the hell? She ground out through gritted teeth. Who is this guy? Where had it all gone wrong? Impossible to tell. Everything was falling apart, their mission was a failure. No, perhaps it had been one from the very beginning. The ambush had been too perfect. Too well executed. As if the enemy knew exactly where they would be. It struck just after dawn, when they were at their most unprepared. That implied a traitor within their ranks, but who? None of that mattered now, she just had to get back to. The arm came out of nowhere. One moment she was soaring through the trees with wild abandon, the next a limb closed around her neck from behind, slamming her face first into the ground. Bucking against her attacker, Kushina slammed her head back with all her might, and was rewarded with an annoyed grunt. Nothing more. All her strength drained away a heartbeat later, sucked up into some unseen sieve. Damn it, no. With a feral snarl, she pulled more of the fox's chakra to her arms and legs, only to find that too had been denied her. Even then she fought on, until a hand closed around her mouth and pressed a foul-smelling cloth to her face. Eyes rolling, her world spinning, she managed to catch a glimpse of her attacker. An orange mask filled her vision, a lone eye staring out at her from within. As she passed out, the masked man tilted his head, giggling madly. Sleep well, little fox. Preview. No one walks away from me. Naruto was silent for a long, agonizing moment. Then, I don't believe you. Please, don't. I'm just a stupid girl, remember? You ready? Minato exhaled in quiet relief. Finally. How many days until we reach the village? That depends. Jirei replied, crossing his arms. Are you going to behave? Thanks for listening. I do hope you enjoyed. If you want the next part of this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. And also check out the other videos that I have created, and enjoy. See you in the next video. Peace.